といてやら
Yes, we all know that screaming. It's Black Clover, an anime that has many criticisms since its conception, mostly the screaming. But today I want to highlight 5 reasons why I think this anime is incredibly underrated. The first reason I think Black Clover is underrated has to do with how it shows complex political systems within the show. Black Clover does a really good job of showing the hierarchy between the commoners and the royal families that are on top of this government system. It does a good job of showing the prejudices and the classism between the two. I think a lot of these themes can translate into real life very well to show different power dynamics that we have going on here in the world. A good example of the snobbery and classism is when Asta, Yami, and Noelle were invited to a banquet in the kingdom. And it shows that snobbery and classism can easily cause conflict between the two parties. After the Licht arc, Black Clover starts to take more of a deep dive into the Clover Kingdom's judicial system. It shows how laws and crimes are taken care of in the kingdom, with a court deciding if you're innocent or guilty. I like that it shows also how different roles are seen quite differently for the kingdom, with the positions of the king and the wizard king, 2 very different individuals who are perceived very differently by the people of the kingdom. The king seems to be more of a figurehead to me, while the actual wizard king seems to be in charge of basically the military, because the magic knights are the Clover Kingdom's military. I really like seeing the dynamic between both of them and how both of them are perceived even among their own staff. It really goes to show you that a high-ranking royal king can sometimes be totally useless, and a lower-ranking noble could be a lot better of a leader. I really like that the show also considers foreign affairs, as the Diamond Kingdom makes a showing early on in the show to understand the different influences of other governments, as well as the internal government of the Clover Kingdom. Like in the real world, it shows that a lot of this is interconnected, and there are many forces when governing a nation to consider. The second reason that I really appreciate this series, and which kind of has to do with the previous reason, is relatable villain motives. As I've said before, I think villains with good, easily relatable motives is super important to a story and a show being really successful to me. And obviously, racism and elitism is at the forefront of the villain's motive in this series. The villain Lick, aka Patry, aka Vengeance, is a perfect example of this. As we go through the story, his motives in his cult aren't quite clear in the beginning, but we come to see that it has to do with a massive genocide in his background, which he completely blames the humans for, which, of course, I don't blame him for being mad. I would be mad too. His motives are completely understandable, and through the show I was thinking, man, makes sense that he's pretty angry. That's a lot to unravel there. Of course, in the end, it went full circle, because we can see that his manipulation is really comparable to the original devil that put the humans and the elves against each other. So I hope that he learned his lesson. I still feel for him though. The third reason that I really think that this show is underrated and that most people probably don't think about is the rivalry between Yuno and Asta is quite different than most of the rivalry we're used to seeing in the main characters in anime. This rivalry is much more friendly and brotherly-like than the rivalries we've seen, such as Macadamia between Bakugo and Deku, where it's more like a bully-victim power dynamic. I really like seeing two people on an equal playing field battling it out versus someone being really cruel and the other one being really nice. And I understand that Asta probably didn't start out on equal footing necessarily, but as the show progresses, it's quite clear that he's catching up to Yuno just as quickly as we expect a shonen main character to. Another example of rivalry I'm not super fond of in anime is between Naruto and Sasuke, as once again we get that kind of bully, I'm better than you, and a victim mentality. I really wish that we could get away from this and just have friendly competition more often, because I don't find it interesting, and I just think it shows a real lack of depth in the main mean bully characters. Throughout the show, even though there is some banter between Yuno and Asta, it still feels very friendly and familial, and like they are rooting each other on from the sidelines. I like that kind of fun nitpicky at each other, but you know that both don't mean it. It's really heartwarming and makes me want to root for them equally. The relationship kind of reminds me of a more mature Gray and Natsu relationship, where once again those kind of brotherly ties, which I am always here for. The next major reason for me is the characters in this show. And now that might have sound like kind of a cop-out, but I have my reasons. These characters are so likable because they have obvious flaws. Other shonens tend to pick out like something small, like, oh, I'm weird around women, or I have a weird hang up that's really not that big of a deal and blow it out of proportion as a flaw. But each of the Black Bulls have a very, very real and almost annoying flaw, but it can be very endearing at times. From Gauche with his very creepy sister complex, to Gray with her painfully shy behavior, and to Gordon with his absolute creepiness but adorable, just wanting friends behavior. By the way, why is there so many G names in this show? It's so hard to tell the names apart, especially when they sound that close together. I always get tongue-tied, but I digress. Each of them have their major flaws, but I think it's what makes them more lovable. I mean, even Luck with his crazy fighting tendencies just makes him more of a fun character to watch. And my favorite, who is behind me, Marileona, I love her even though she is very, very quick to violence. So even royalty and people that are considered higher up characters still have these very real human flaws that make them super relatable. And I really think these characters highlight the strong point and overall theme of the show that shows that real people with real flaws can still succeed. If you look at the whole group of Black Bulls, they have so many flaws, but they work so well together. And I think that those flaws and them kind of being an outcast together makes them one of the best, most family-like groups. I really love it. It's, once again, reminds me of
the Fairy Tale Guild,
in the way that they're all kind of outcasts themselves, but it pushes it further to play even more on their flaws to show that flaws and learning to overcome them can make you better and a stronger group of people. I just can't talk enough about how much this anime highlights outcasts overcoming, and it really makes me happy. Now to my favorite reason why I think Black Clover overall is underrated, and that is action scenes. If you have not seen this anime, you have to watch it just for the action. I am talking intense. I would compare it to the hype of when Goku went Ultra Instinct. I'm talking just mega ultra hype. The fight in the Queen of Witches arcs is perfection. It is so hype. I was screaming like the entire time when Asta first did his Black Asta form. That whole arc was so exciting. I would put it on the hype level also of the Dark Tournament for Yu Yu Hakusho. I love it. It is amazing animation. It is fast paced. It is so intense. Like, I live for this type of action. If you were never to care about anything else other than action, you should watch this series for action alone. And the action is pretty common, I would say. There's only a few episodes here and there that are slow paced, but when they get into it, they get into it to where you're invested in every single fighter. Because Asta isn't the only hyped one. I think Yuno and most of the captains are great. And this woman right here is amazing. Every time she fights, it is just out of this world. Her background music is rock. She punches everything. It's so awesome. I love it so much. It is absurd the amount of money that they probably put into the animation for their action sequences, because you're just like, oh, it's a regular anime, and then when they go into action, you're like, where did this come from? It probably took a whole army of people just to make one frame. Oi! So that's why I think Black Clover is an underrated show. Feel free to disagree with me or agree. I'm sure as the show continues, I will find even more reasons to love it. So far, it's one of my favorites to watch, and I look forward to getting new episodes every week. I'm so excited to see their characters grow and become even more lovable than they already are.